3 is a relatively brief look at some very fundamental principles of biomechanics. As I said last week, if you've taken HPE 312, this should be review for you. If you haven't taken HPE 312, this will give you a nice foundation to go into that class and not get completely overwhelmed as it begins, okay? So, we've mentioned a couple of times that developmental changes in movement are predictable, right? When we look at particularly the MSU chart, we can see that there's this predictable sequence of changes, sometimes quite small changes, sometimes large changes, that lead to the next level of the skill, okay? So the changes that we see are not consciously occurring because of this, but they're based on optimizing these biomechanical principles like height, distance, speed, right? And creating the most efficient movement pattern over time, right? So that means if we're going to really understand the developmental sequence, we have to have some idea of these biomechanical principles, okay? And the brain sort of uses these principles even though the child doesn't cognitively understand them, right? So they can be seen across a variety of different motor skills, right? When we watch the skill change, it's often being calibrated or possibly recalibrated to be successful. So if you have an injury and you have to have surgery, then you have to recalibrate through your rehab that movement pattern, and you use those biomechanical principles to relearn a motor skill you could do before your surgery, right? So often, the goal of utilizing the principles is to produce more force, more velocity, right? More power or more accuracy. So to be successful at a skill, we have to produce a motor pattern that is more effective than the previous motor pattern, right? And so that can sometimes change with experience as well, right? And so what happens when we watch people learning a new skill, and this doesn't matter whether it's a child or an adult, if you present someone with a brand new skill, motor skill that they have not done before, right? Then what you see initially as they're trying this skill is a lot of variability in how the motor pattern is put together to achieve what they think is the outcome, right? That variability in movement is the brain experimenting with working with the constraints that are being imposed, right? So it's trying to work out which movement gives the best outcome. Okay, I have to go out and share my screen. It was so much easier last week when I could just run the PowerPoint outside the class. Screen, here we go. to the collaborative room. It's going to do that every time. Because it won't play from the PowerPoint in the classroom, will it? All visible windows on your screen will be shared. What the heck does that mean? All right, we're experimenting here. I don't know what's going to happen, guys. Ooh. Okay. I do not like that. Let's stop that.
Just put those URLs into Firefox.
Not here. He said to put them into a different window, though. I'm sorry. All right. I'm going to jump out of the classroom and jump back in and see if that changes anything. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Let's try and get the camera back. There we go. Alright, let's reset the recording in case it's, oh, it's still recording. That's useful. No, it's not coming up. Alright. This is very annoying. Okay. One word in here. Okay. All right, so I don't know. All right, so what I want you to do before lab tomorrow, go to your Lifespan Motor Development web book, right? Go to your web resources for students, find chapter 5, which is the locomotor chapter, and find the videos for jumping. And you'll be able to find these two pieces of video and have a look at them. So I'm going to describe what you are going to be looking for when you're watching them. All right? Okay, so little girl on the left, A does not jump off both feet quite at the same time. So you can see she's got one foot in front of the other there. And so we get an uneven force production out of each leg. All right? She barely leaves the floor. It's very up and down. Okay? one of the things you have to bear in mind when we're, and again, we'll talk about this a lot as we go through the semester. When the brain is learning new skills, so the left side of my brain controls my right arm and my right leg and my right side, right? And the right side controls the left side. So when we are learning skills that involve cooperation between both sides of the body, that involves a lot of work and learning on behalf of the brain to coordinate that information and to talk back and forth from left to right so that both limbs do the same thing at the same time. Okay? So in this instance, that hasn't happened yet because her left and her right foot don't quite coordinate together as she jumps. Her arms do, if I remember rightly, her arms do nothing at all. Okay? And it's a very sort of not very effective jump. There's a lot of, not a lot, but you'll see she goes up and not very far forwards. That's because at this point, her force production is all down into the floor. Right? This young lady, when you watch this piece of film, is quite a lot more advanced. Both feet leave the floor at the same time. She's able to push down and back, so she not only comes up off the floor, but she jumps forward. The interesting thing that this young lady does is she swings her arms the wrong way. Right? So instead of swinging her arms into the jump, she swings her arms the wrong way as she tries to jump. So mechanically, her legs are doing much better here, but her arm swing isn't right yet. It's holding back how high and how far she can jump. So when we are working with motor skills, we have to understand the concept of the center of gravity. It's not real per se, it's a mathematical concept. All right? So the center of gravity is the point about which we can say the mass of the person moves. All right? So it's somewhere around your belly button, a little bit lower. For girls, it's a little bit lower than it is for boys because they have wider hips after puberty, wider hips, and tend to carry more of their weight on their legs and their bum, and that drops the center of gravity down a little bit. Makes them better at balancing. Okay? Center of gravity doesn't have to be within the body, right? So if I'm able to move my body into different shapes, it changes where the center of gravity is. So on this pike somersault dive, because the pike is so tight, his center of gravity is probably moved, so it's going to be outside the body, in between the body and the legs, and it's going to have come up a little bit closer towards his chest. Okay? In the picture on the right, the individual is doing a Fosbury flop, high jump, and in a Fosbury flop, the idea is to arch as much as you can over the bar and then kick your legs over. So because this arch is so strong, in this case, the center of gravity, if I was going to analyze the Fosbury flop, the center of gravity would be outside behind the hips. Okay? Why do we need to know where the center of gravity is? Right? Because the only way we can cause motion or movement in the human body is the application of external forces. Right? The only cause is the application of external forces. And in this case, we're not talking about a segment, so I'm not talking about an arm, I'm talking about my body as a whole. Okay? And where the center of gravity is in relation to the line of the force production alters the kind of movement that we see. Is it linear or is it rotational? Okay? So, if we want linear motion, then the force production, the line of the force production has to pass through the center of gravity. All right? If we want rotational motion, the center of gravity is going to lie outside the line of the force production. Okay? So let me see if I can draw something to help you visualize that idea. Let me get a whiteboard. Okay. All right. So, this is a very odd looking pencil. Okay, so X marks the spot, right? So the center of gravity of this pencil is probably, this end is a little bit lighter than this end, so it's going to be just past the middle. It's going to be somewhere around here. Okay? So, if I want to move the pencil straight up and down, sorry, this is a bit difficult to control. All right, if I want to, I wonder if that means I can use my, no. If I want to move the pencil straight up and down, then I'm going to apply the force straight through there, right? Does that make sense? If I want to move it down, I would apply the force straight through the center of gravity, but downwards. Right? This is a floating magic pencil, you understand. Okay? All right, so what about if I want to move the pencil left or right in a straight line? Where do I apply the force? Kayla, what do you think?
I would apply the force honestly to the right. That's where I'm thinking. I don't know, but that's what I think.
Be a little more specific for me. Where am I going to draw this arrow if I want the pencil to move horizontally?
If you wanted to move horizontally to the right or to the left?
Doesn't matter, whichever you prefer. But I want it to stay linear
Okay.
in the horizontal plane.
Okay, then if you wanted to move it to the right, to the left, you need to start on the right side, like at the tip of the pencil, and then push it to the left. That's
Okay, good.
Like,
All
describe
right.
it.
Good. So I'm going to apply force that goes through the center of gravity to create linear motion on the horizontal line. Is everybody following that idea at the moment? Draw another very bad pencil. Ooh, this one's got a bit of a wiggle in it. Ignore the wiggle because that would change things. All right, so now, instead of moving the pencil up or down or left or right, I want to spin the pencil, okay? So spinning is rotational motion. If I want to spin the pencil, I have to apply the force outside the line of the center of gravity. Okay? So, for example, if I apply force here, the pencil is going to spin that way. Right? If I apply force here, the pencil is going to spin that way around the center of gravity. This acts like the axis. Does that make sense at all?
Yes, ma'am.
It does? Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah, because if you put it on thing when it was spin the other way, and if you put it on the other side,
Yeah.
it'll spin the other way too.
Yeah. So it's all to do with, and the reason we have to understand it in movement is because everything we do is rotational or linear, right, when we move. So it's all to do with where I apply the force in relation to where the center of gravity is. So I have to understand where the center of gravity is in order to know where the force application needs to be to create a certain outcome. Okay? All right, let's go back to our PowerPoint. All right, so long time ago, an exceptionally clever man came up with some principles that to this day really have not ever been disproved, right? They still hold true. No one's come up with something that's necessarily better. And, you know, this was a long time ago. Newton was a long time ago when that apple hit him on the head. So, okay? So, what we have is 3 rules or laws of motion that Newton devised that apply to all the movement that we do, all right? So the first rule, first law, is that an object at rest stays at rest and an object in motion stays in motion unless it's acted on by a force, an external force. So when we read that as movement people, we can, in some circumstances, take out object and put person, right? A person at rest stays at rest, and a person in motion stays in motion until acted upon by an external force. Okay? So this is really interesting because if we think about that, that means I'm standing here and I want to move forwards. Right? So I walk forwards. Where's the external force that applied to my body that allowed me to go from stationary to motion? Where's that external force being applied? Right? That's quite an interesting concept, because when we just look at someone walking, I don't see an external force. Right? There's no one behind me pushing me. Or sometimes there is when we're going up a very steep hill when we're backpacking. Brian has to push me, but in here, right, we don't have an external force. But we have to have an external force according to the principles of biomechanics. So, what happens here is that the muscles of my legs push down into the floor, right? And the floor pushes back on my body, right? So if I push down, I go up, right? If I push down and back, I go forwards. Because what happens is the floor pushes, I push down and back, the floor pushes up and forwards. Right? And that links to one of the other laws as well, as you'll see in a minute. Right? I cannot move unless a force is applied. And once I'm moving, I can't stop unless a force is applied. So, if you were in outer space and you threw a baseball, what would happen to that baseball?
It would keep going.
Keeps going. Exactly, right? Until it hits a planet or an asteroid or something else, right? That ball is going to keep going because in outer space there's no forces. What if I throw a ball on Earth? And let's say I'm in a big field and I throw the ball, what's going to happen to the ball?
It'll eventually hit the ground.
It'll hit the ground, right? Because it hits the ground because of the pull of gravity, right? So there's an external force pulling on this ball. And if the ground is hard, what happens when the ball hits the ground? It bounces. Because the force of the ball hitting the ground pushes back and the ball bounces. What if I throw it and it lands in sand?
It stops.
It stops, right? Because the surface tension of sand isn't strong enough to apply enough force back on the ball. Right? So we have to understand that once we're in motion, it takes an external force to slow us down or to stop us. Right? That's really important to understand that idea. And one of the terms that's connected with that is the term inertia. Okay? Inertia is the resistance to motion that's related to your mass. So that means that something, an object with lots of inertia, is harder to move and harder to stop than someone with less inertia. Which is why we want our linebackers to be built like this, right? Because I can run into them, but their inertia is so huge, I might not have any effect at all. Okay? And then the last term that we need to know is that momentum is mass times velocity. Often in everyday language, we intersperse velocity and speed. They're not technically the same thing because velocity has direction and speed doesn't. Speed is just how fast, right? But if we were working with someone who was a hardcore biomechanist, and I said, don't worry too much about the difference between velocity and speed, they'd have a heart attack, all right? But for you and I, we don't need to worry too much, all right? So what's the mass of the object, and what is its velocity, gives me its momentum, all right? We are going to stop there before all our brains blow up. I want you to review this material before Tuesday. All right? Because we have to move on. But if you need me to go over anything again, we need to start with that. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Tomorrow we will look at I think we're doing some brain development information in lab tomorrow, which is always fun to look at. And yeah, I think that's it. I have office hours between 1 and 3. If you've got a burning question you have to have explained, by all means come and see me. It would be great to see you. All right? Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow. Bye.